Do you find yourself caught in a loop of stopping and starting your spiritual practice? Well, stick with me and hopefully I can help with that. So, Dag the Agus Fáilte. My name is Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School. I am a Shanachia storyteller, practicing Dag the priest, and founder of the Irish Pagan School, co-founder of the Irish Pagan School, my partner Laura O'Brien. And this video really speaks to something that comes up time and again with a lot of our students who feel that, it goes well in the beginning, but then it flags off, and then they try again, and then it flags off, and it leads to this cycle of worry in so many ways that, sadly for some, makes them step away from their practice entirely. If you think about it, you might be following along with us for a while, you might have done some courses, and when you're in the headspace, when you have the energy, it's easy. You sit down, you light the candle, you take the few breaths, and then you do a meditation, you do some of your reading, you do some of your coursework. And it's great. And it goes for a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3. But then something comes on, a bad day, a bad week, you stumble. The candle isn't lit. You're not visiting the altar. Stuff begins to gather dust. You can't remember the last time you did a meditation. And then the next stage in the SAD program kicks in, which I experienced myself, the guilt and the shame. And then we begin this spiraling narrative in our own minds of I'm not doing enough. I'm not honoring my gods. I'm not turning up for them. And maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe it's not for me. It's all too much. It's all too hard. Or I'm not the right person, or I don't feel I should be called in this direction. If you have experienced any of those things at all, you're not alone. Even me here, I experience the exact same stuff at times. And kind of why I'm doing this video, because if I can talk about it honestly and openly, then we can all find our way back, find our way through to something a little bit more consistent and stable. So there's so many different steps. The risk that really comes in is not an untidy altar. Telling yourself that you're not doing it right, or you're not turning up, or not good enough. It's not just about, oh, well, I didn't clean off the offerings, or I didn't it's actually a little bit deeper, and it becomes this self-fulfilling negative spiral, which doesn't serve you, regardless of your relationships to gods, guides, guardians, ancestors, the land, wherever you happen to be with whatever practice. And this isn't just specific to Irish paganism. I can speak from Irish paganism because that's the path I work in, but this applies across the board, no matter what practice or expression of paganism you're working in, or spiritual belief you're working in. And really the first thing to address this and to kind of correct it is the practice isn't failing you. It's that the practice wasn't, or no, sorry, you're not failing the practice. You're not failing in your spiritual work. It's the fact that whatever the work is you're doing isn't syncing with you, isn't aligned with you, isn't designed for you and your process and your life. And that's the real difference. So much of what people understand or expect about spiritual practice comes from a dominant Christian circumstance. Let's be honest, call it what it is. Where you have to honor the Sabbath days, you have to go to mass, you have to do your worship every Sunday. You then have to don't eat fish, or don't eat meat on Fridays. I was raised in a household in the 80s where there was never meat on Fridays, which was a hangover from Christianity. It was no, it was always fish on Fridays. Now, I love fish. And in Ireland, as an island, it was never a bother. But looking back on it now, the idea that there was this prohibition on this aligned with a spiritual practice didn't seem to make sense to me, because I didn't choose to adopt into that. I never vouched for that. And okay, I'm getting off track here. Pull myself back on track. We need to stay focused, because that's part of the process. It's literally understanding what our practice is supposed to be for us in our uniqueness and in our individual expression of humanity. For us here at the Irish Pagan School, I can provide you all of the different classes on the what. I can provide you a whole lot of information on the why. All of these videos we're trying to address the how. But even then, I'm explaining to you how I get it to work and how it works for me. But you need to make sure that whatever practice you're designing and working within works for you, because that's what it is at the end of the day. Now, from an Irish pagan's perspective, to take it into our wheelhouse, Christianity brought us the every week on the Sunday, the Lord's Day. I I honored that. I was in the choir. I was like did altar service. I did like all of those kind of things, but it was always show. It was pageantry. It wasn't a deep, fulfilling spiritual connection for me, which is why I again felt like a bad Christian at that point. That I'm not doing spirituality right. That I'm not like doing it right, and that I led to the shame where I actually doubled down. I was like, yeah, I'll be a choir boy. Absolutely. I'll make sure I do every mass, all of the mass parades. I'll clean up after the church when people leave. Like, I thought that putting more effort in, driving more energy at that would be a way of breaking through to some deeper experience. And more effort is never the answer when it comes to these things. If you're finding that you have this effort, you have this great kind of flow, it's going well for you, you're doing regular practices, and then you stumble, something bad day, whatever it is, and then suddenly you can't muster the effort anymore. The candles on the altar haven't been lit for 3 weeks. Again, there's stuff sitting there that hasn't been dusted off. Like, it can really send you off on that negative spiral and loop. So what I'm trying to say here, and I actually have notes written down to try and keep me on track, it's not about doing it right some of the time. And it's not about doing big things all of the time. What it really is, what a deeper spiritual connection, what a lived spiritual practice looks like, is a practice that's designed to fit with you in your daily life. And I've got a couple of examples for it here. So if you find that the practice keeps collapsing, it keeps falling apart on you, it's not about discipline. It's not about not being good enough. It's not about putting in more effort. It's about looking at the practice, analyzing it, saying, okay, well, why is it not working for me? And what can I do that's different, that will work for me, but still honors my commitments and honors my relationships? And so we have more details on this, and there's a great resource. It's before I go further into the story, if you go to irishpagan.school/practice, and I will throw a link below, you'll be able to download a free guide that will just give you a couple of simple, very simple practices that you can just adopt and carry on and do. So we have more content on you. The how. We're trying to help with that. So when it comes to the Irish expression, Catholicism, Christianity brought in their rituals and brought in their structures, honoring saint days and Fridays with no meat and lighting the candles over Lent, etc. All of those kind of stuff were brought in as part of that ritual practice. But deeper down, it was the lived spirituality was something very different. And we can see that by looking at the sources in Irish folklore. And great resource again, ducas.ie, National Folklore Collection. You can see information recorded from our ancestors written down in the handwriting of school children. And they went out and they collected all of these practices and all of these stories. But it shows a lived connection with our spiritual cycles. It's not about, I have to do this all of the time. It's like, okay, well, if I make this as simple as opening the door, lighting the fire for the first time, going to bed, taking a moment when I step outside or when I first see the moon. There's a whole lot of different things within the folklore and tradition which actually were spiritual acknowledgements and spiritual touchstones, but they're not big, grand, sweeping pageantry performances. It was literally just, this is my spiritual connection with me, to my ancestors, to the land, or to my gods, guides, and guardians. So a really big important part of all of the practice is keep it simple. Break it right the way down. Like, link it to something you are already doing every day. And by doing that, you're able to then weave the spirituality of your existence into your existence. It's not a separate thing that you have to put over here. It's not something that you bolt on top of your looking after yourself, feeding your kids, taking care of your family, going to work, doing a job, looking after your pets, cleaning your household, honoring your commitments to your friendships. There are so many different things that, make up the life that every single one of us lead. And if we have to put on, like, honoring our spirituality, if we view it as this separate extra thing that we need to do, need to achieve, even saying that makes me shudder, because that's not living in spirituality. that's existing in a form of performative pageantry or a commitment to it. Like I've known many people who would go to mass every Sunday, in the Christian faith or in the Catholic faith, and they would say their prayers, do their rosary, but then they'd walk past someone needing help on the street. They wouldn't give charity to someone looking for assistance, or they'd speak out of the other side of their mouth about people that they don't like or people that they want to judge, or in the worst cases, people of color, race, ethnicity. Like the idea that you're fundamentally basing yourself in the Christian religion, which has a tenet of everybody love everybody and don't be an asshole. That, like, love thy neighbor as I have loved thee, the whole Jesus thing. And then you would turn around and judge your neighbor and be an asshole about them because they don't look the same as you do. You're dishonoring the spirit of your belief structure, or you're showing that it's all just pageantry and performance. And those kind of breaks is really what took me away from my own spirituality in Christianity and Catholicism. It was like, where's the lived reality of this? And that's how I personally began to question and chase. And I'm trying not to get off onto my own story, but I did go through many cycles of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be really committed to this expression of faith. And then I'd drop off and it was not. And maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I need to look around for something else. And maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I need to look around for something else. Because I was trying to mold myself into a practice that someone else had designed, not design a practice that fits with me, honoring the traditions of my ancestors, honoring the connection with the land, and honoring myself as part of that process. So when it comes down to it, willpower will only carry you so far. Being able to push yourself into oh yeah, if I'll make sure I turn up, I'll make sure I'll the moment that willpower runs out, you stop. Even though the meditation is good for you. Even though that the practice of honoring your ancestors, honoring your deities, gods, guides, guardians, honoring just the landscape in which you live is good for you. You don't do it. A tough day comes, a hard day comes, a hard week follows, and then again, loop, shame, spiral, leading you to question whether it is even for you. Again, I've done the exact same thing. You're not alone in this. What it really comes back to, though, is making it what we call in the Irish Pagan School the minimum viable practice. What's the smallest thing? What is the one thing you can do every single day? Takes a second, 2 seconds. And then you connect that to something you're already doing. Personal example for me is I make a coffee in the mornings. When I make a coffee in the mornings and I'm pouring cream, if it's the first cream, I make a second coffee and I pour that for the dagda. But even in that moment where I'm at the kettle making a coffee for me, because I've built it, I still say the dagda's name aloud. Majin ma akara, majin ma an dagda, which is good morning, my friend, good morning on dagda. It takes seconds to say. But in that time where I'm doing the coffee stuff anyway, I'm acknowledging the importance of the relationship with the deity that I work for. When I hop in the shower, I'm cleaning myself anyway. Taking a single breath, 2 or 3 breaths to calm myself, to stand still and allow the water to wash over me and let go and relax myself. I'm doing those things anyway, but by adding in that extra thing of I'm going to allow this water to cleanse me. That's how I do my cleansing rituals. It's not a big performance of I must get out of the sacred waters from the thing. I must bless them 4 times under the moon or whatever. No, it's the shower water that I'm getting into in the mornings. And because it's not about anyone seeing me doing a thing. No one needs that mental imagery. It's about doing it for me and doing what works for me so I can live in a practical, spiritual way. But what about the big things? Am I saying that your spiritual practice exists only as your own personal expression? Sure. But that doesn't deny the existence that there are big things. But you don't have to carry the weight of that on yourself. You don't have to set all the calendar reminders. Now's the full moon, now's the dark moon. When's the next? Even that, who has time for that? Actually, yeah, sorry, deep aesthetics and like hermits who are like remotely separated or financially stable to be able to just pursue their own individual spirituality without have to worry about where the next paycheck is coming from, where the next meal is coming from, how they're supporting their family long term. Like people who are absolutely minted can go and live their life of like exploration and spiritual enlightenment and spend hours a day in front of. Now, I'm not ragging on this. I don't want to be negative. I'm not about that. Some people have put their time in, they've earned their rest. And at the time of their life, they're now able to say, actually, well, no, where is my spiritual fulfillment? Absolutely. There's no shame in that. But the idea that you have to go to every single conference, go to all of the events, go to all of the things, honor every full moon. If you can, great. If that works for you, fantastic. But is that your lived, deeper spiritual practice? Or is that just, again, that performance and pageantry we talked about earlier? Heavy lifting happens, but where one person has their own day to day practice, the community, the collective, the gathering acknowledge the bigger things. So in the Irish spiritual practice, in the Irish like circumstance, we don't have the Wheel of the Year, by the way. The Wheel of the Year is a construct from later neo-pagan circumstances. It doesn't apply. They lifted some of the words from the older Irish spirituality, but in the Irish pagan circumstance, Wheel of the Year doesn't apply. But that doesn't mean there aren't 4 big fire festivals every year, which are Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, and Samhain. Those are the 4 big fire festivals every year, and those are aligned with the traditional cultivated agricultural experiences of the community. You prepare yourself, you clean, you arrange things, you begin your first forms of planting when you get to Imbolc, you make things ready. Bealtaine, you're getting your stuff in, you're beginning the growth, everything begins to kind of fulfill, and you're doing your planting and you're growing. Lunasa, you're harvesting, you're bringing in what has grown throughout that period, and you're beginning to lay down your supplies for the dark times. And then Samhain, you're preparing yourself for that dark time to go into the quiet time when stuff doesn't grow. More on all of those fire festivals. We have resources at the Irish Pagan School on all of those things, but that doesn't have to be part of your spiritual practice, but it can be part of your spiritual practice. You don't have to remember exactly when everything is going to happen. You just have to know that there are 4 fire festivals which kind of align a focus of energy that you can bring into your spiritual practices during that period. As I'm talking now, recording this, we're between Bealtaine and Lunasa. Lunasa is coming up pretty quick. So the energy is still growing. The energy is still about that abundance and that protecting and the creation before we get to the harvest, which will be into the Lunasa circumstance. That just means that I'm able to, even that, saying that, acknowledging that, I'm aligning myself with that spiritually and energetically. So you don't have to do all of the heavy lifting yourself. Honoring yourself every day, engaging in the minimum viable practice, small things that you're linking on top of all stuff you're already doing. And then when those bigger shifts come around, you can also acknowledge the solar circumstances with the solstices and equinoxes if you're looking to go beyond the simple 4, which is part of the Irish pagan practice again. Lots more at that school. Those are ways to building into your practices, but it is about a lived expression of spiritual belief, not a streak of spins you have to get every day, or I have to and there is rewards. There's great benefit to gamifying some processes and some chores, being able to engage in the dopamine and the mindset and the neurochemicals involved in that to increase your motivation. But treating everything like it's just a tick box, oh, I'm going to get this, I'm going to complete that, I'm going to get... Where's the depth? Where's the actual completeness and fulfillment of a spiritual life in existence? So there's a couple of different elements that I've gone through and touched on as we've gone across this, and I'm aware I don't want to run over time and keep talking at you for absolutely ages. But yeah, I go through starts and stops myself. I'm currently trying to come out of a stop. But even in the challenge of not being able to turn up in a deeper, like more committed, more energetic, focused way, I'm still making a coffee every morning. I'm still saying the doctor's name out loud. I'm still having my showers and giving myself that moment of cleansing. Going out to do the garden and, like, water all the plants that are out there. That's engaging with the growing energy of Bealtaine. That's literally me cultivating what has been planted by my beloved Laura and is growing fantastically green in the back garden. But I'm engaging with that. That is a spiritual practice. That can be part of my spiritual acknowledgement because I'm moving with the energy of the season. And it's not a big ritual. It's not a big performance. I'm not throwing on fancy capes and gowns. I'm literally in my Lena, rocking out, bare feet on the grass, actually. That's a personal preference for me. I love having the old bare toes in the grass. But you don't have to. There's no specific way you have to do these things. And that's what I'm really trying to get to at the end of all of this. The reason why you find yourself stopping and starting and falling in and out of practice and going through these loops of shame and spiral, or having a stack of books to read on your thing, or all those courses that I bought that I never actually did or never got around to. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not a lack of enthusiasm. It's not anything wrong with you at all. And please hear me on that. It's just the fact that you haven't found it and designed it for you. And that's what it really comes down to. Even this video, I'm trying to give guidance, trying to say, oh, you could do this, or you could do that. It has to be something that fits for you. I'm only giving suggestions on what works for me. But just because it works for me doesn't mean you have to do it that way. You need to ask yourself the question, what does my spirituality look like for me? What am I honoring? What am I connecting to? And how can I make it a minimum viable practice so that you're still doing it even when those bad days comes around? Because they always do. Also, the bad days don't stay. All right, I'm not going to end on a downer because we're growing. And this is even here, even this, it's all about a cycle. Everything moves in cycles and seasons and processes. And living a daily spiritual existence is living a spiritual cycle and living within those cycles for yourself. Not because Jon said so, not because anything else other than this is what actually fulfills me and makes me feel complete as a human, or as the spiritual expression or elements of my human existence. I'm going to slide into a metaphysical rant at this point, so I'm going to stop here. I'm going to remind you again, if you want further suggestions, you don't have to do coffees and showers the way Jon says, or watering the garden the way Jon says, but you can go to irishpagan.school/practices, and that will then give you a download link. You literally just download it. It'll give you a PDF and say, here's something to do. Here's something to do. Here's something small. Just try it. And that's how you engage and continue, because the worst thing that really can happen to somebody is they end up feeling lost and alone and disconnected from their spirituality or from themselves, because they feel they haven't done enough, or they're not, in the right way. They're not worthy of community and spirituality and connection. And that saddens me every time it happens. But it delights me when someone finds their way. And we have had it. People come back and they're like, actually I used to study witches a long time ago and kind of fell off my path, but I've come back around and I'm really, really connecting now. And I'm delighted every single time. But I also want to help to try and prevent that happening. And so it's not about big, hard effort all of the time. It's not about more discipline and more enthusiasm and being good enough. Park all that bullshit. It's about designing and being aware of what your spiritual life looks like for you, and then just doing it. Minimum viable practice, consistently over time. And if you're falling in and out of cycles, trust the year and the natural cycles of community to have your back. Hopefully this has been helpful. Look after yourself. Follow on, catch some more videos. Make sure you do that like and subscribe kind of stuff. And until next time, slán. Goodbye.